Welcome to a world where the sun isn't just a ball of fire in the sky. Imagine it as a god, a powerful ruler sailing across the heavens every day, battling cosmic serpents in the darkness, deciding the fate of mortals below. This is ancient Egypt, a civilization where myths weren't bedtime stories, but rules for living, survival guides, and entertainment all rolled into one. For over 3,000 years, along the life-giving Nile, gods weren't distant figures. They were in the waters, the winds, the crops, even the clothes you wore. Yes, fashion mattered when the gods were watching and sometimes judging. But they weren't just quirky. They controlled life, death, and everything in between. Picture this. Every day the sun rises, floods come, crops grow, and people ask the sky, the river, and the winds one question: which god is pleased today? Which one is angry? The answer wasn't just spiritual, it could mean the difference between a bountiful harvest or starvation. And it's not just seriousness, here there's drama, intrigue, and even humor. Ancient Egyptians had hundreds of gods, each with their own quirks, powers, and rivalries. Some were worshipped everywhere, others only in tiny towns, and yes, some were bizarrely specific. There was even a god who controlled the smell of your perfume, so buckle up. Over the next few minutes, you're going to meet gods who could flood the land, resurrect the dead, and curse their enemies all before breakfast. And trust me, their stories make anything on Netflix look tame. Before we dive into individual gods, we need to step back and see the world they ruled. The one the Egyptians actually lived in, because understanding their universe is the first step to understanding the divine chaos that shaped every moment of life in ancient Egypt. Now imagine the stage where all of this unfolded. Ancient Egypt wasn't just pyramids rising from the sand, it was a narrow, fertile ribbon of green carved into golden deserts, all thanks to the Nile River. To the east and west, endless, blistering sand. But along the Nile, life, cities buzzing with traders, bargaining, craftsmen shaping gold into charms, farmers waiting for the flood, and priests whispering prayers to keep the gods satisfied. The Nile wasn't just water, it was the heartbeat of the entire civilization. When it flooded, it meant survival. When it didn't, it meant famine. And because the Egyptians depended so heavily on it, they believed the gods controlled it. Every rise of the river was a message from the heavens, every harvest a sign of divine approval or punishment. What's wild is how seamlessly the divine and the everyday blended together. You didn't just pray to the gods, you lived with them. They weren't distant rulers on some far-off mountain. They were in your food, your weather, your health, even the way you dressed. Choosing the wrong color or ignoring a ritual wasn't just bad luck. It could mean offending a god. Daily life was a constant balancing act, trying to keep both nature and the divine in harmony. Farmers worked the land with the belief that the gods guided the growth. Traders thought their success or failure in the marketplace depended on unseen hands of deities. And priests, they weren't just religious leaders, they were power brokers, the middlemen between humanity and cosmic order. But here's the fascinating part. While most of us today separate religion from daily routines, for Egyptians, everything was spiritual to them. The Nile was sacred, the desert was sacred, even language itself was sacred. Words carried divine power. To speak was to create. That's how deeply gods were woven into the fabric of their lives. And if you thought having one god to keep happy was hard enough, the Egyptians had hundreds, each demanding attention, offerings, and respect. Some ruled the skies, others ruled the underworld, and some specialized in the strangest little details. But before we get to the bizarre and the powerful, let's explore how the Egyptians believed gods were everywhere, hidden in plain sight, shaping every breath of life. To the Egyptians, the world wasn't just alive, it was divine. Every corner of existence, every animal, every natural force carried the mark of a god. Look at the sky, that was a god. The river flowing beneath your feet, another god. Even the gentle breeze brushing your face could be a spirit at work. Animals weren't just creatures, they were walking symbols of divine power. The falcon soaring overhead wasn't just a bird, it was Horus, watching from above. The slithering crocodile lurking in the Nile. That was so big, dangerous, and unpredictable. Even cats, curled up in homes, were considered sacred to Bastet, the goddess of protection and grace. Now here's the fun part. Imagine their religion like an ancient version of Netflix. Thousands of channels, each with its own storylines, rivalries, betrayals, and cosmic battles. Some gods had nationwide followings, worshipped in massive temples with grand ceremonies. Others were hometown favorites, known only to the locals. And some were so oddly specific that you have to laugh. Yes, there really was a god connected to perfume, making sure your scent stayed divine. But what made this world so captivating wasn't just the number of gods, but how personal it all felt. If you were a farmer, there was a god for your crops. If you were a craftsman, there was a god guiding your hands. Even in love and heartbreak, there was a divine force pulling the strings. For the Egyptians, the gods weren't distant, they were neighbors, guardians, and sometimes troublemakers. But here's where it gets really interesting. While the gods were everywhere, the Egyptians also believed everything started from the same place. Before the falcon-headed Horus or the jackal-headed Anubis, there was only one thinker, endless, dark, watery chaos. And from that chaos came the first spark of creation. Before there were temples, before there were kings, before there was even land, there was only chaos. The Egyptians called it Nun en endless, dark, watery ocean with no sky, no earth, no order, just pure, formless nothingness. And from that nothingness, the very first gods emerged. One version of the story says Atom appeared, a god who created himself out of the void. Imagine that, no parents, no beginning, just a spark of existence rising from eternal darkness. Other myths say it was Ptah, the great creator, who simply spoke the world into being. His words were so powerful that every living thing came into existence just by his command. And then there were stories of Ra, the sun god, bursting forth from the waters to bring light into the world. But here's the catch. Creation didn't happen all at once. It wasn't like flipping a switch. The universe unfolded piece by piece, layer by layer, carefully organized into a cosmic balance the Egyptians called Mat, order, truth, harmony. And every god that appeared took on a role in that balance. First came the sky and the earth, then air, then the waters, and eventually life itself. The gods weren't just born, they were assigned duties. Like actors in an enormous play, each responsible for keeping chaos from returning. Because if none ever rose again, if order ever collapsed, everything would dissolve back into that endless ocean of nothing. And this is where the drama begins. These early gods didn't just create, they fought, they betrayed, they fell in love, and sometimes they destroyed. Creation wasn't clean. It was messy, complicated, and filled with conflict. And out of that conflict came the stories that shaped every Egyptian temple, law, and ritual for thousands of years. But if you think that act of creation was dramatic, wait until you hear about what happened after. Because once the world existed, the gods had families. And those families, they didn't just rule, they fought each other in ways that make modern soap operas look tame. If creation was the opening act, then what came next was pure family drama, gods, tangled in betrayal, love, revenge, and resurrection. The Egyptians didn't just imagine their deities as rulers of the cosmos, they gave them families. And like any family, things got complicated fast. Take Osiris, for example, the noble king, who brought civilization, law, and agriculture to the world. He had a devoted wife, Isis, who was both motherly and fiercely powerful, known for her magic that could heal, protect, and even bring back the dead. But Osiris also had a jealous brother, Set, and Set wasn't just jealous, he was ruthless. The myths say Set lured Osiris into a trap, sealed him in a coffin, and cast him into the Nile. You'd think that was the end of the story, but it wasn't. Isis searched tirelessly, gathering Osiris's body, using her spells to bring him back to life, if only for a moment. Together, they conceived their son, Horus, the falcon-headed god who would grow up to challenge Set for the throne of Egypt. And that battle, it wasn't a quick fight. It was years of conflict, trickery, and shifting allegiances that shook the entire divine order. And this wasn't the only story of betrayal. Gods quarreled, shifted sides, and sometimes even broke taboos. These myths weren't just gossip, they were the Egyptians' way of explaining the struggles of life itself. Betrayal mirrored war. Resurrection reflected hope. Revenge symbolized the fight to restore balance when chaos threatened to take over. Think about it like this. The gods weren't perfect role models, they were larger-than-life reflections of human struggles. Their stories taught Egyptians how to live, how to forgive, when to fight, and when to trust. And through every battle and betrayal, one message remained clear. Chaos is always waiting to return. It's up to order, justice, and family to push it back. But the drama wasn't only in their relationships. It was written into their very bodies because, unlike the polished, human-shaped gods of Greece and Rome, Egyptian deities often looked very different. Some had falcon heads, some had jackal faces, some had forms that were downright terrifying. And every feature, every animal head, carried a meaning. One look at the Egyptian gods and you know instantly they weren't designed to look ordinary. Unlike the polished human-like gods of Greece or Rome, the deities of Egypt wore the faces of animals, the bodies of humans, and sometimes forms so strange they could send chills down your spine. But here's the key, none of this was random. Every head, every limb, every symbol meant something powerful. A falcon head wasn't just for decoration, it showed vision that stretched across the sky, the ability to see everything from above. That was Horus, sharp-eyed and vigilant. The jackal, head of Anubis, symbolized his role in death, guiding souls through the perilous journey of the underworld. A lion-headed goddess like that wasn't just for intimidation, her ferocity represented divine wrath so intense that, according to legend, she nearly wiped out humanity in a single rage. Even their clothing and crowns carried secrets. The double crown worn by gods and pharaohs wasn't just a fancy headdress, it symbolized the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, a constant reminder that order had to be kept across the land. The scepters they held weren't just props, they were tools of power, representing life, death, and authority. What's fascinating is that the Egyptians didn't think these appearances were strange. To them, the animal world and the divine were inseparable. A falcon's flight, a jackal's instinct, a lion's fury. These were glimpses into cosmic power. By giving their gods these forms, they weren't imagining monsters, they were expressing truths about nature and the universe. And while some gods looked fearsome, others appeared nurturing or even playful. Bastet, with the head of a cat, wasn't terrifying at all. She represented protection, family, and the comforts of home. But even she had a dangerous side when provoked, reminding people that every god had layers, just like the forces of nature. They embodied. So when Egyptians prayed, they weren't bowing to strange hybrids, they were honoring powers they saw reflected in the world around them. The falcon, the crocodile, the lion, they weren't just animals. They were messages from the gods, living reminders of divine strength, danger, and balance. But while forms revealed their powers, it was their roles and stories that made them unforgettable. And among this vast pantheon, some gods rose above, the rest commanding worship across the land, shaping myths that still survive thousands of years later. Out of the thousands of gods in Egypt's pantheon, a few stood at the very top, so powerful, so beloved, that their names echoed through temples, tombs, and prayers for centuries. These weren't just deities, they were the foundation of Egyptian life, rulers of the skies, the earth, and the afterlife. First, there was Ra, the blazing sun god, sailing across the heavens by day and battling serpents of chaos by night. Every sunrise wasn't just light, it was proof that Ra had won again, keeping darkness at bay. Without him, life itself would end. Then came Osiris, the green-skinned ruler of the underworld. He wasn't feared like death itself, he was revered, because he represented resurrection, renewal, and eternal life. Every Egyptian hoped that in death, they'd join him and find peace in his kingdom. Standing beside him was Isis, the queen of magic, healing, and motherhood. Her love and loyalty for Osiris made her one of the most powerful and beloved figures in all mythology. To the Egyptians, she wasn't just a goddess, she was the ultimate protector. A divine mother who could outwit enemies and bend reality itself. And then there was Anubis, the jackal-headed guide of souls. While Osiris ruled the underworld, Anubis was the one who led you there, weighing your heart against the feather of truth. If your soul was pure, he opened the path to eternity. If not, well, let's just say your journey ended quickly. These were the stars of Egyptian mythology, the gods who shaped life, death, and everything in between. But they weren't alone. Surrounding them was a supporting cast of fierce warriors, clever tricksters, and terrifying forces of nature, each with their own stories that blended myth, morality, and mystery. And the best part, these weren't static figures frozen in stone. Their legends grew, changed, and collided over centuries, becoming some of the most captivating stories ever told. From world-shaking battles to intimate tales of love and betrayal, their myths carried the lessons and fears of an entire civilization. But before we dive deep into Ra's solar battles, Isis's sorcery, or Anubis's judgment, we need to take a step back. Because to truly understand these gods, we have to grasp the bigger picture, the vast interconnected web of myths that explained not just life and death, but the entire universe itself. So, what have we uncovered so far? A civilization where gods weren't distant, they were everywhere. In the flood of the Nile, in the whisper of the wind, in the rise of the sun. They weren't just figures of worship. They were neighbors, rulers, protectors, and sometimes destroyers. From the chaos of Nun to the tangled family dramas of Osiris, Isis, and Set, to the strange and symbolic forms of falcons, jackals, and lions, Egypt's gods weren't simply imagined. They were essential, woven into the very fabric of daily life. And that's what makes them so fascinating. Unlike myths that stay locked in the past, these stories feel alive. They reveal how humans once understood order, chaos, love, betrayal, and the hope of life after death. They aren't just legends of another time, they're reflections of timeless struggles we still face today. But here's the thing, we've only scratched the surface. The gods of Egypt weren't static characters. Their stories evolved, merged, and shifted across dynasties, temples, and cities. The myths you've just heard are just the beginning snapshots of a cosmic drama that lasted for over 3,000 years. So ask yourself, if Ra battled chaos every night just to rise again in the morning, what does that say about the struggles we face in our own lives? If Osiris could be betrayed, destroyed, and still return, what does that say about resilience? And if Isis could bend reality itself through love and determination, what does that say about the power of devotion? The gods of ancient Egypt didn't just rule the heavens, they ruled imaginations, hearts, and destinies. And in their myths, we see not only the fears of a civilization long gone, but also the hopes and questions that still linger within us today. Because if the universe truly began in chaos, maybe we're all still fighting to keep it at bay. The birth of the gods of civilization has asked the big question, where did we come from? For the ancient Egyptians, the answer was never simple. Egypt wasn't one unified kingdom at the start. It was a patchwork of powerful cities, each with its own temples, priests, and sacred traditions. And each city told its own story of creation. Not one story, not two, but several. Each version was different, sometimes strange, but all carried the same truth. Order emerges from chaos. The Heliopolitan creation, Atum, the self-Medethi most famous version, came from Heliopolis, the city of the sun. In the beginning, there was only none, a vast, dark ocean of infinite water. No land, no sky, no sun, no moon. Only endless silent water stretching in every direction. From that formless void, Atum arose, the self-created god. Some myths say he appeared on a tiny primeval mound. Others say he willed himself into existence. Either way, Atum was the first spark of life, but eternity alone, that's unbearable. Through sheer willpower, some say spitting, sneezing, or less polite methods, Atum brought forth to children Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, goddess of moisture. From them came Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. But Geb and Nut fell in love so deeply, so passionately, that they clung together, locking the world in darkness. Atum stepped in. He commanded Shu, the god of air, to separate them. With a mighty push, Nut rose into the sky and Geb remained on the ground. Stars scattered across Nut's body, and the space between them became the world we know. This first generation of gods, Shu, Tefnut, Geb, and Nut, set the stage for the next Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys, whose stories would define the cosmic drama of life, death, and rebirth. The Memphite creation, Ptah the thinker, but Heliopolis didn't get the final word. In Memphis, priests had a different vision of creation. Ptah, the god of craftsmen and builders, didn't spit or sneeze life into being. He imagined the world in his heart, then spoke it into existence. Every god, every element, every law of nature existed because Ptah willed it so. Where Atum was chaotic and messy, Ptah was methodical and precise. He was the cosmic engineer, designing the universe with the power of thought and speech. The Homopolitan creation, the cosmic egg in Homopolis creation, took an even stranger form. 8 primordial gods, the Adoid, swam in the waters of chaos, frog-headed males, snake-headed females, representing dualities like light and darkness, water and void, hiddenness and visibility. From their interactions came land, the primeval mound, and a cosmic egg. From that egg, Ra, the sun god, was born, breaking free to ignite the sky and start the cycle of day and night. Picture it, a giant egg floating in dark waters, cracking open, and unleashing sunlight into the universe, a symbol of birth, potential, and the dawn of life itself. Chaos versus order-wise, so many creation myths. Politics. Each city wanted its god to be the ultimate creator. But the Egyptians didn't see these stories as contradictions. They were layers of truth. All versions shared one central idea. From chaos comes order. None. The primordial waters symbolized uncertainty and potential. Out of it came Mat, truth, balance, and harmony. Creation wasn't a one-time event. Every sunrise was a reenactment of this eternal battle, a daily victory of order over chaos, whether the world began with Atum Peta or a cosmic egg. The message was clear: chaos can be controlled, order can be built, and the gods are its architects. And with creation complete, the stage was set for the next great act, the rise of the gods themselves, or Osiris, Isis, Horus, Set, Anubis, beings who weren't just distant rulers in the sky, but players in a cosmic drama of love, betrayal, and resurrection. The rise of the great gods, with the universe shaped and order established. The stage was set for the gods themselves to step into the spotlight. These weren't distant, untouchable beings. They were vibrant, flawed, and utterly fascinating characters whose actions would shape life, death, and destiny in Egypt for millennia. Ra, the sun god and cosmic ruler, first and foremost was Ra, the blazing sun god. Every sunrise wasn't just light, it was Ra triumphing over chaos, sailing across the sky in his solar bark. By night, he battled serpents in the underworld, fighting to ensure the sun would rise again. Ra wasn't just a symbol of life, he was the heartbeat of existence. Without him, crops would fail, rivers would dry, and darkness would reign. Temples dedicated to Ra stretched across Egypt, his worship binding communities together in daily rituals and festivals. Osiris, the king of the underworld. Then came Osiris, the green-skinned god of the underworld. Unlike Ra, Osiris's power was hidden beneath the surface. He ruled the realm of the dead, offering resurrection and hope for eternal life. Osiris's story was one of betrayal and triumph. He was killed by his jealous brother Set, only to be restored by his devoted wife, Isis. This cycle of death and rebirth wasn't just myth, it mirrored the cycles of the Nile, the land, and the human spirit itself. Isis, the queen of magic, standing beside Osiris, was Isis, the ultimate mother and magician. Her devotion was unmatched, her power legendary. Isis wasn't just nurturing, she could bend reality itself, heal the wounded, protect the weak, and outsmart even the most cunning gods. For Egyptians, Isis represented hope, love, and cunning. She wasn't merely a goddess, they saw her as a force capable of changing fate. Anubis, the guide of souls. No pantheon is complete without a guide for the dead. And in Egypt, that role belonged to Anubis, the jackal-headed god. While Osiris ruled the underworld, Anubis led souls through it, weighing their hearts against the feather of truth. If a soul was pure, Anubis opened the gates to eternal life. If not, Well, their journey ended abruptly. His presence reminded humans that life and death were intertwined with divine order, and every action had consequences. Set, the god of chaos, of course. No story would be complete without conflict. Enter Set, god of chaos, storms, and violence. He wasn't evil for the sake of evil. He represented the necessary forces of disorder that challenged order and growth. His feud with Osiris and later Horus created some of the most dramatic myths in Egyptian history. Without Set, there could be no struggle, and without struggle, no balance. These gods weren't just characters in myths, they were living forces in the minds and hearts of Egyptians. They explained the rising and setting of the sun, the floods of the Nile, the seasons, and even moral order. And while these stories may seem distant or fantastical today, they were lessons, warnings, and guides. They taught humans how to live, how to respect cosmic balance, and how to survive a world in which chaos was never far away. But these are just the main players. Surrounding them were countless other gods, some fierce, some playful, some specialized in the most peculiar domains, each adding layers to Egypt's vast and complex mythology. Lesser-known gods and everyday divinities, while Ra, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Anubis dominated the myths. They were just the tip of the iceberg. Ancient Egypt had thousands of gods, many of them specialized, strange, and sometimes downright bizarre. Some were worshipped across the country, others only in tiny villages, but every one of them had a role to play in the cosmic balance. The protective cat goddess, take Bastet for example. Cat-headed and fierce, she was the goddess of home, family, and protection. She could be gentle, bringing comfort and fertility, or ferocious, unleashing wrath on anyone who threatened her. Loved ones. To Egyptians, cats weren't just pets, they were sacred. Its influence extended into daily life, reminding people that even the smallest household gods had power. Thoth, the god of knowledge and writing. Then there was Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and magic. He was the divine scribe, keeping records of every human deed, every judgment in the underworld, and even the movements of the stars. Thoth wasn't just a scholar, he was a mediator. In many myths, he settled disputes between gods, guided the dead, and ensured that cosmic order remained intact. Hapi, the Nile's spiritive and natural forces, had divine guardians. Hapi, the god of the Nile, controlled the river's floods. Without him, crops would fail and famine would spread. Egyptians depended on Hapi's favor, offering rituals and gifts to ensure that the Nile continued to nourish the land. Sobek, the crocodile god. Then there was Sobek, the crocodile god. Terrifying to some, revered by others, Sobek symbolized strength, power, and protection. Crocodiles in the Nile weren't just dangerous, they were sacred extensions of Sobek's power. Worshipping him was a way to respect nature's deadly forces while seeking safety. The niche and peculiar gods beyond these. There were gods for almost everything. Deities who controlled perfume, grain, beer, fertility, childbirth, writing, music, and even laughter. Some were worshipped by entire regions. Others were local spirits with very specific duties. This was a pantheon that reflected life itself, complex, interconnected, and deeply symbolic. Egyptians didn't just tell stories about gods, they lived with them. Every action, from farming to crafting to praying, was entwined with the divine. The sheer variety of gods also reinforced a key lesson. Balance wasn't maintained by the few mighty deities alone. Every god, no matter how small or obscure, had a purpose. Chaos could erupt in countless ways, and it was the combined influence of all these divine forces that kept the world in harmony. But the gods weren't static, they had personalities, relationships, and conflicts. And as we move forward, we'll see how family drama, rivalries, alliances among deities shaped myths that were as thrilling as any story told today. Family, drama, and divine conflicts. Egyptian mythology wasn't just about creation or cosmic balance, it was also about relationships, rivalries, and betrayals. The gods were larger than life, but they were also deeply human in their emotions, passions, and conflicts. And nowhere is that more evident than in the tangled web of divine families. Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. Betrayal and resurrection. Take Osiris and Set. Osiris, the wise and just ruler of the underworld, was beloved by the people. His brother, Set, however, embodied chaos, storms, and disruption. Driven by jealousy, Set murdered Osiris, scattering his body across Egypt. Enter Isis, the ultimate mother and magician. Her devotion was unmatched. She searched tirelessly, reassembled Osiris, and used her magic to bring him back to life, proving that love and cunning could defy even death itself. From their union came Horus, the falcon-headed god, destined to avenge his father and restore order. This cycle of betrayal, death, and resurrection wasn't just drama, it reflected the rhythms of life, the Nile, and the struggle between chaos and order. Horus versus Set, the battle for the throne. Battle with Set is one of the most famous conflicts in Egyptian myth. It wasn't just about family, it was a cosmic struggle for the throne of Egypt, representing the fight between stability and disorder. Their battles were fierce and symbolic. Set storms and chaos against Horus's order and justice. Every mythic fight mirrored the challenges Egyptians faced in maintaining Mat, the delicate balance of truth, harmony, and law in their world. Other divine rivalries and alliances, but family drama wasn't limited to Osiris and Set. Across the pantheon, gods formed alliances, feuded over power, or tricked one another in clever ways. Some gods were protectors of others. Some were rivals. Some even switched sides depending on circumstance. These stories weren't just entertainment. They taught lessons, loyalty and betrayal, cleverness and caution, the consequences of ambition, and the importance of justice. Through these myths, Egyptians explored human emotions and societal values on a cosmic scale. Why conflict was central? Conflict was essential. Without Set's chaos, there would be no struggle, and without struggle, order could not exist. The myths didn't present evil as pointless. They showed that balance required constant vigilance, courage, and cleverness. In essence, the gods were mirrors for humanity. Their rivalries reflected the challenges of life, jealousy, love, ambition, and the eternal fight to maintain harmony in a world that constantly teetered toward chaos. Symbolism and forms of the gods. One of the most fascinating aspects of Egyptian mythology is how the gods looked and what those appearances meant. These weren't random designs or decorative quirks. Every feature, every animal head, every unusual form conveyed power, responsibility, and a message about the divine. Animal heads and divine power. As many gods combined human and animal forms, each carefully chosen. Horus, falcon-headed, symbolized vision, vigilance, and kingship. His eyes could see everything across the sky, and as the divine king of Egypt, he watched over the land. Anubis, jackal-headed, represented death and protection. Jackals prowled graveyards, so Anubis became the guardian guiding souls safely through. The underworld, Sekhmet, lion-headed, embodied destruction and war. Her gaze could incinerate enemies, a reminder that divine wrath could be swift and absolute. Each form communicated a specific function, teaching Egyptians how to understand and relate to the divine forces surrounding them. Multiple limbs and mystical abilities. Some gods had multiple limbs, heads, or eyes. These weren't just artistic choices, they symbolized superhuman abilities and omnipresence. A god with 4 arms could act in multiple realms at once. A third eye could see hidden truths. Every extra limb or feature amplified the god's power. Enriched colors and iconography. Ebon colors held meaning. Green, like Osiris's skin, symbolized fertility, life, and resurrection. Red could represent chaos or destructive power, depending on context. Golden hues often indicated divinity, eternity, and the radiance of the sun. Objects and animals associated with the gods' crowns, staffs, scepters, sacred animals also reinforced their roles. Egyptians didn't just worship gods visually, they read them like a language, understanding their function and influence through symbolism. Why forms mattered? These symbolic forms weren't abstract, they were practical. Egyptians believed that by depicting gods in precise ways, they could invoke their power, gain protection, or communicate with them in rituals. Art, religion, and daily life were inseparable from mythology. Through these forms, myths became tangible. They weren't just stories in the sky, they were visible, interactive forces that shaped the land, society, and human experience. In short, every feather, head, limb, and color had a purpose. Egyptian gods weren't just divine, they were a language, a living system that connected humans to the cosmos, teaching lessons, warning of danger, and offering protection. And now, having understood their forms, we're ready to see how these gods interacted not just with each other, but with humans, how worship, rituals, and daily life entwined with divine power. Worship, rituals, and human connection. The gods of Egypt weren't distant, abstract figures. They were woven into every aspect of daily life, from the rising of the sun to the harvest of crops. From childbirth to funerary rites, worship wasn't just an occasional activity. It was a constant dialogue with the divine. Temples and priests, the heart of devotion. Temples were the centers of religious life. But they weren't just buildings, they were cosmic homes for the gods. Statues represented the deity, and rituals kept their spirit present. Priests acted as intermediaries, performing daily offerings, chanting sacred texts, and maintaining the temple's sanctity. Some temples were massive, like Karnak or Luxor, reflecting the importance of the god they housed. Others were small shrines in villages, dedicated to local or niche deities. Every temple, large or small, was a bridge between humans and the divine. Daily rituals and offerings. Daily rituals weren't just ceremonial, they were essential. Food, drink, incense, and symbolic items were offered to the gods to sustain them. Egyptians believed that neglecting a deity could invite chaos or misfortune. Rituals also reinforced order. By performing the same actions repeatedly, humans helped maintain Mat, the cosmic balance. Festivals, processions, and hymns weren't just entertainment, they were acts of devotion, reminders of divine presence, and communal celebrations of order triumphing over chaos. Magic and personal devotion. Egyptians didn't just worship through temples, they practiced magic to communicate with, protect themselves from, or gain favor from the gods. Amulets, charms, and spells were everyday tools to invoke divine power. Personal devotion was just as important as public ceremonies. Families prayed to household gods, carried protective talismans, and performed small rituals at home. Every action, word, and gesture could be a form of connection to the divine. The gods in everyday life, from farmers hoping for fertile soil to merchants seeking safe travels. Gods influenced all aspects of life. Bastet might protect the home, Hapi would bless the Nile's flood, Thoth ensured wisdom and fairness, and Sobek controlled dangerous crocodiles. Even minor gods mattered. Their roles were specialized, but ignoring them could disrupt harmony. Egyptians didn't just tell stories, they lived among gods, seeing their influence everywhere. Why worship mattered. Worship wasn't superstition, it was survival. Maintaining divine favor kept chaos at bay. Every offering, every chant, every ritual was a reinforcement of Mat. The gods were guides, protectors, and enforcers, ensuring that the universe continued to function. By engaging with the divine, humans weren't passive observers, they were active participants in the cosmic order. Their devotion shaped both earthly life and the unseen forces that governed it. Rumors, controversies, and unknown stories of the gods even in a world ruled by divine order. Not everything was neat, predictable, or entirely known. Egyptian mythology was full of secrets, oddities, and controversial tale stories that were whispered, debated, or only recorded in obscure texts. These lesser-known myths add depth, mystery, and a touch of scandal to the pantheon. The forbidden deeds of Set, the god of chaos and storms, wasn't just a villain in one story. Rumors and fragmentary texts suggest he was involved in countless schemes, sometimes against humans, sometimes against other gods. Some tales hint at Set attempting to disrupt Mat beyond his feud with Osiris. These stories weren't widely celebrated. They served as cautionary tales. Set embodied the unpredictable forces of nature and human behavior, reminding everyone that chaos could strike at any moment. Isis's secret powers. Isis wasn't just a nurturing mother and devoted wife, she was a master of magic so profound that even other gods feared her. Some texts suggest she could command life and death, bend reality, and manipulate cosmic laws in ways that were considered taboo. These rumors weren't necessarily scandalous, they were warnings and lessons, emphasizing the power of knowledge, cunning, and the consequences of wielding magic carelessly. Horus's mysterious feats. Horus, the avenger of Osiris, had stories that were sometimes violent, sometimes puzzling, and occasionally morally ambiguous. Certain texts imply he could take multiple forms, outsmart other gods, and engage in acts that blurred the line between justice and vengeance. These tales illustrate a deeper truth. The gods weren't moral archetypes, they were forces of nature and human experience, complex and sometimes contradictory. Obscure and local gods beyond the famous deities. Countless minor gods had stories that are largely lost or fragmentary. Some were worshipped only in a single city or village. Others had mysterious domains, perfume, grain, childbirth, or even more peculiar spheres of influence. Rumors suggest some of these local gods had rivalries with larger deities, or that certain rituals were forbidden outside their regions. These unknown stories kept mythology vibrant, dynamic, and alive in the imagination of the people. Why these stories matter. These controversies and secrets weren't just gossip, they provided lessons. They warned against arrogance, highlighted the importance of wisdom, and reminded humans that even gods had rules, limits, and consequences. By exploring these lesser-known tales, we gain a richer understanding of the Egyptian pantheon, a world where power, love, betrayal, and cunning coexisted, and where the divine was never entirely predictable. Festivals, celebrations, and the divine calendar. In ancient Egypt, gods weren't just objects of worship, they were central to the rhythm of life. The calendar itself was designed around the gods, marking festivals, celebrations, and sacred days that connected humans to the divine. The solar cycle and wraith daily journey of Ra across the sky wasn't just a story, it was a living calendar. Sunrises and sunsets dictated work, rituals, and agricultural cycles. Festivals honoring Ra celebrated the triumph of light over darkness, and were accompanied by music, processions, and offerings to ensure that the sun would rise again tomorrow. Osiris, and the cycle of death and rebirth. Osiris, god of the underworld, inspired annual rituals that mirrored his mythic death and resurrection. During the festival of Koyak, Egyptians reenacted the story of Osiris, planting symbolic seeds, mourning his death, and celebrating his revival. These rituals weren't just theatrical, they were believed to sustain the fertility of the land and the balance of life. Isis, magic and protection. Isis was celebrated for her magical powers and devotion to family. Festivals in her honor emphasized protection, healing, and the triumph of cleverness over adversity. Devotees would carry amulets, recite spells, and perform ceremonies invoking her blessings for health, childbirth, and domestic harmony. Processions, music, and community festivals weren't limited to elite temples. Local celebrations involved entire communities. Music, dance, and offerings turned streets into stages for the gods, allowing humans to participate directly in divine stories. Even minor deities had their day in the spotlight, reinforcing the idea that every god mattered in maintaining cosmic order. The calendar as a cosmic tool. The Egyptian calendar wasn't just practical, it was sacred. It measured agricultural cycles, religious observances, and cosmic events. Festivals aligned with the Nile's floods, the solstices, and lunar cycles, showing how intimately human life was tied to the rhythms of the universe. Through these celebrations, Egyptians didn't just honor the gods, they interacted with them, reinforced Mat, and participated in the ongoing story of creation, order, and divine influence. Myths in art and architecture. In ancient Egypt, myths weren't confined to scrolls or spoken stories. They were carved into stone, painted on walls, and built into the very structures of temples and tombs. Art and architecture weren't just decorative. They were storytelling, teaching, and magic all at once. Temples were more than places of worship, they were cosmic stages. The layout often mirrored the journey of the gods. Hypostyle halls, sanctuaries, and pylons reflected the layers of creation, the separation of earth and sky, and the path from chaos to order. Entering a temple was stepping into a divine narrative, where every wall, column, and relief told a story. Hieroglyphs, the sacred writing of the gods, were more than communication, they were magical. Each symbol carried divine energy, preserving myths, invoking protection, and recording rituals. From pharaohs to commoners, Egyptians read these stories in stone and paint, seeing history and myth intertwined. Tombs were equally expressive. Funerary art depicted Osiris, Anubis, and other gods guiding the dead through the afterlife. The walls illustrated the journey of the soul, moral lessons, and cosmic order, ensuring that the deceased could navigate the challenges of the underworld. Even mundane daily scenes were imbued with mythological significance, connecting human labor and life to the divine. Statues and carvings weren't static, they were active. A falcon-headed Horus perched on a temple wall wasn't just a decoration. He was a guardian, a protector, a presence bridging heaven and earth. Similarly, depictions of Bastet Sobek or Thoth served as reminders of divine oversight in daily life. Through art and architecture, myths became tangible. Egyptians could walk through a story, participate in the divine order, and feel the presence of the gods in every stone and brushstroke. Their world was one where creation, worship, and daily life were inseparable, and every structure told the story that was alive, powerful, and eternal. The core gods of Egyptian mythology. At the pinnacle of the Egyptian pantheon sat Ra, the sun god and celestial superstar, ruling the sky, the sun, and the very cycle of life. Every morning, Ra rose in his solar bark, sailing across the heavens to bring light to the world, and every night he battled Apophis, the chaos serpent, determined to swallow the sun whole. Majestic, authoritative, and occasionally temperamental, Ra commanded the devotion of mortals who feared the disasters his anger could bring. Often merging with Amun as Amun-Ra, he became the ultimate king of gods. Priests performed daily rituals, offering bread, beer, incense, and hymns to keep his bark sailing smoothly, maintaining cosmic order and balance. Next was Osiris, the god of death and resurrection, who introduced the concept of life after death. Once a wise and just king, Osiris was beloved by humans and gods alike, until his jealous brother Set murdered him. Death, however, was not the end. Isis, his devoted wife and master of magic, resurrected him long enough to conceive their son. Horus Osiris then became the ruler of the underworld, guiding souls with fairness and precision. His story of tragedy, hope, and ultimate justice mirrored the cycles of nature. The flooding of the Nile, the renewal of cropsand provided mortals with a roadmap for the afterlife. Isis, the unstoppable mother, magician, and strategist, played a key role in both preserving life and shaping destiny. She tracked down Osiris' scattered body parts, magically reassembled him, and outsmarted Set to restore cosmic balance. As the mother of Horus, she nurtured and prepared him to reclaim his father's throne. Her magical abilities spanned healing, protection, and curses, earning her worship nearly equal to Ra. Isis symbolized devotion, intelligence, and the transformative power of love. Set, the god of chaos, deserts, storms, and trickery, embodied disorder and unpredictability. Ambitious and cunning, he murdered Osiris, stole the throne, and caused turmoil wherever he went. Yet Set also protected Ra from Apophis during nightly battles, proving that even chaos had a necessary role in the cosmic order. Fierce, flamboyant, and powerful, Set reminded mortals that disruption could serve growth and change. Horus, falcon-headed and embodying kingship, protection, and vision, was destined to challenge Set and restore his father's legacy. From childhood, he trained, strategized, and battled Set in epic conflicts lasting decades. Pharaohs were considered earthly embodiments of Horus, linking divine authority directly to kingship. The Eye of Horus symbolized protection, healing, and restoration, appearing on amulets, jewelry, and tombs as a safeguard for the living and the dead. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming and the afterlife, guided souls through the underworld, oversaw mummification, and ensured the weighing of the heart was fair. His association with cemeteries and guardianship of tombs made him the ultimate funeral director and cosmic security guard, safeguarding the journey to the afterlife. Hathor, goddess of love, music, dance, and joy, brought lightness and inspiration to the pantheon. She soothed hearts, encouraged creativity, and assisted in childbirth, embodying the joys of life. Yet she could transform into Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war and destruction, demonstrating the balance of joy and power, creation and destruction, love and ferocity. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, writing, and knowledge, maintained the universe's records and oversaw the outcomes of the weighing of hearts. Credited with inventing writing, mathematics, and science, Thoth was the cosmic scribe and master of logic, ensuring order and clarity among gods and humans alike. Together, Ra, Osiris, Isis, Set, Horus, Anubis, Hathor, and Thoth formed the core of Egyptian mythology. They governed the sky, earth, afterlife, love, chaos, wisdom, and creation, their stories intertwining in cosmic battles, family dramas, and divine strategy. These gods shaped not just mythology, but the very fabric of ancient Egyptian life, law, and morality. Beyond them, dozens of other gods filled the pantheon, each quirky, mysterious, and endlessly fascinating, proving that ancient Egypt had a divine character for every purpose imaginable. Lesser known and quirky gods of Egypt. Beyond the famous 8, ancient Egypt was home to a vast array of lesser-known deities, each with unique powers, peculiar domains, and fascinating stories. These gods weren't minor by accident. They reflected the Egyptians' belief that every aspect of life, nature, and society needed divine oversight, no matter how small or strange it seemed. Take Base, for example. This dwarf god was a protector of households, childbirth, and children, often depicted with a fierce, comical face designed to scare away evil spirits. Base might not have ruled the sky or the underworld, but he was crucial in daily life, ensuring homes and families were safe from harm. Then there's Taweret, the hippopotamus-headed goddess of fertility and pregnancy. Her fearsome appearance concealed her nurturing role, protecting mothers and infants during childbirth. Egyptians believed her presence could prevent complications, making her one of the most practical and revered deities in the home. Sobek, the crocodile god, embodied both danger and power. Worshipped in areas along the Nile, Sobek represented the unpredictable strength of the river, protection, and military prowess. Farmers prayed to him for irrigation and safety, while soldiers invoked his ferocity in battle. Sobek's duality, life-giving and deadly, highlighted the Egyptians' understanding of nature's balance. Khnum, the ram-headed god, was believed to shape humans and gods alike on his potter's wheel, forming bodies from clay and breathing life into them. His role emphasized creativity and craftsmanship, showing that creation wasn't limited to cosmic myths. It extended into the everyday lives of Egyptians. Even more obscure were gods like Hapi, the god of the annual Nile flood, whose abundance or scarcity could dictate life and death across the land, and Meretseger, the cobra goddess of the Theban necropolis, who protected tombs and punished those who disturbed sacred graves. These deities may not have been household names, but they were integral to maintaining balance, protection, and prosperity together. These quirky and specialized gods enriched Egyptian mythology, proving that the divine permeated every corner of life, from grand cosmic battles to intimate daily rituals. They added personality, unpredictability, and depth to the pantheon, ensuring that ancient Egypt was not just a world of order, but a vibrant, living tapestry of divine presence. The role of animals in Egyptian mythology. In ancient Egypt, animals weren't just part of the landscape, they were sacred embodiments of divine power. Gods often appeared in animal forms, and ordinary creatures carried spiritual significance, blurring the line between the natural and the supernatural. The falcon, for example, represented Horus, the sky god and protector of kingship. Falcons symbolized keen vision, speed, and dominance over the heavens. Depictions of Horus with a falcon head reminded Egyptians that rulers were guided by divine sight and authority, linking earthly power directly to the gods. Cats held a place as well, particularly through the goddess Bastet. She embodied protection, fertility, and domestic harmony. Worshippers kept cats in their homes, not just for companionship, but as living symbols of the goddess's watchful eyes. To harm a cat was unthinkable, as it would invite divine wrath. Crocodiles, embodied in Sobek, symbolized strength and unpredictability. Egyptians both feared and revered these powerful predators, honoring Sobek to ensure safety along the Nile's treacherous waters. Meanwhile, the ibis, representing Thoth, conveyed wisdom, knowledge, and the meticulous recording of cosmic events. Even seemingly minor animals carried meaning. Jackals, associated with Anubis, represented guardianship over the dead, while scarabs symbolized rebirth and the cyclical nature of life. By integrating animals into mythology, Egyptians created a world where every creature, whether riverbound or desert roaming, served as a bridge between mortals and gods. Through these divine connections, animals became more than symbols. They were messengers, protectors, and embodiments of power, reminding humans that the natural world was inseparable from the spiritual one. Every paw print, feather, and scale could hold a story, a blessing, or a warning from the divine. Temples, priests, and daily worship temples in ancient Egypt were not mere buildings. They were living embodiments of the gods themselves. Each temple acted as a microcosm of the universe, a sacred space where mortals could interact directly with divine forces. The layout often mirrored cosmic principles, with towering pylons, hypostyle halls, and inner sanctuaries representing layers of creation and the journey from chaos to order. Priests were the intermediaries between humans and gods, performing daily rituals to maintain cosmic balance. Their duties went far beyond simple prayers. They bathed and dressed statues of the gods, offered food and incense, recited hymns, and conducted elaborate ceremonies designed to sustain their principle of truth, balance, and harmony. A lapse in ritual could be catastrophic, for Egyptians believed the gods' favor was essential for the Nile's flooding, fertile crops, and societal stability. Worship was not limited to temples. Homes often contained small shrines or statues where families could offer food, incense, or prayers to protective deities like Base or Tahuret. Festivals amplified this connection, transforming entire cities into stages for mythic reenactments, processions, and music. Participation in these rituals reinforced community, devotion, and the human role in maintaining cosmic order. Temples also functioned as centers of knowledge, housing sacred texts, astronomical observations, and medical scrolls. Priests were scholars, astronomers, and magicians, ensuring that religious practice and practical wisdom were inseparable. Through temples and priests, the divine became tangible, showing that the gods were not distant figures but active participants in the rhythm of daily life, shaping law, morality, and survival itself. Magic and the power of words. Magic, or Heka, was central to Egyptian life, and the spoken word held immense power. Egyptians believed that words, rituals, and symbols could influence reality, protect against harm, or even alter fate. Magic wasn't superstition, it was a vital force woven into the fabric of the universe, directly tied to the gods' authority. Priests and magicians wielded this power with precision. Spells were recited during daily temple rituals, at births, and before journeys to the afterlife. Amulets inscribed with protective texts acted as tangible conduits of divine energy, shielding the wearer from evil spirits or illness. Even ordinary Egyptians could perform small acts of Heka, using charms or recitations to maintain harmony in their homes. The gods themselves were intertwined with magical practice. Isis, for instance, was renowned for her mastery of magic, able to heal, protect, and resurrect through her spells. Thoth, the scribe of the gods, codified wisdom, law, and magical knowledge, ensuring that cosmic and earthly order were preserved. Magic also reinforced morality and social structure by invoking the correct words, performing rituals, and honoring the gods. Egyptians upheld maintaining balance between humans, nature, and the divine. In this sense, Heka was both a practical tool and a philosophical principle, demonstrating that knowledge, speech, and intention could shape the world in accordance with cosmic law. Through magic, Egyptians experienced a universe where every word and gesture carried weight, and human action could align with divine will, bridging the gap between mortal life and the eternal forces of the gods. The afterlife and the journey of the soul. For the ancient Egyptians, life didn't end at death, transformed into a journey through the afterlife, a realm as complex and vivid as the world of the living. The soul, or Ka, needed guidance, protection, and preparation to navigate this perilous journey, and the gods played a central role in ensuring its safe passage. The deceased were guided by Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming and the underworld, who oversaw mummification and the weighing of the heart against Mat's feather of truth. This process determined whether a soul could continue its journey or face dissolution. Tombs were filled with spells, amulets, and illustrations from the Book of the Dead, providing step-by-step instructions for overcoming obstacles and earning eternal life. Osiris ruled the underworld with fairness and precision, offering hope that death could lead to resurrection and immortality. His own story of betrayal, death, and revival symbolized the cyclical nature of life, the Nile's flooding, and the promise that death was not the final act. Isis and Horus further reinforced this promise, representing protection, guidance, and the restoration of order. The afterlife was also a place of reward. Those who followed Mat could dwell in the field of reeds, a paradise mirroring the ideal life along the Nile, with abundant crops, flowing waters, and eternal peace. Funerary art, tomb inscriptions, and elaborate burial rituals ensured that every soul had the tools needed to reach this eternal home. Through these practices, death became more than an end. It was a continuation of the cosmic order, a journey that reflected the principles of balance, justice, and divine oversight. The Egyptians' meticulous preparation for the afterlife revealed their deep belief that human existence was inseparable from the gods, and that life, death, and eternity were part of a single, interconnected story. Festivals, music, and celebration. Egyptian religion wasn't all solemn rituals, and cosmic battle celebration played a vital role in connecting mortals to the divine. Festivals brought communities together, transforming cities into stages for drama, music, dance, and devotion. They reinforced the god's presence in daily life and reminded people that joy, creativity, and social cohesion were sacred. Many festivals reenacted key myths. For example, the Osiris festival dramatized his death, resurrection, and Horus' triumph over Set. These public performances allowed participants to experience divine stories firsthand, reinforcing moral lessons, cosmic principles, and the hope of renewal. Music, singing, and chanting energized these events, and elaborate processions carried statues of gods through streets, allowing devotees to witness and honor the divine up close. Hathor, the goddess of music, dance, and joy, was central to many of these celebrations. Her presence encouraged merriment, artistic expression, and community bonding. Even temples often hosted musicians and dancers, integrating creativity into religious life, demonstrating that the Egyptians understood pleasure as a conduit to spiritual and social harmony. Festivals also marked natural cycles, flooding of the Nile, harvests, or seasonal changes linking human life to cosmic rhythm. Through these celebrations, Egyptians not only honored the gods but actively participated in maintaining Mat, ensuring balance between earth, sky, and humanity. In essence, festivals turned devotion into living, breathing experiences, blending the sacred with the joyful, and showing that worship was as much about participation and celebration as it was about reverence and order. Temples as cosmic gateways. Temples in ancient Egypt were far more than places of worship. They were carefully constructed gateways between the human and divine realms. Each temple acted as a miniature cosmos, designed to reflect the order of the universe and embody the presence of the gods on earth. The architecture itself told a story, guiding visitors from the chaotic outer world into the sacred inner sanctum where the divine resided. The outer courts welcomed crowds for festivals, markets, and public ceremonies, while inner halls were reserved for priests who conducted intricate daily rituals. At the heart of each temple sat the sanctuary, housing the god statue and serving as the focal point for communication between humans and deities. Only the high priests, and sometimes the pharaoh, could enter this sacred space, emphasizing the separation between mortal and divine while highlighting the temple's power as a spiritual bridge. Priests acted as mediators, performing offerings, chanting hymns, and maintaining the ritual purity of the space. Their work was essential for sustaining Marot, ensuring that the balance between chaos and order remained intact. Temples also served as centers of learning and administration, storing sacred texts, astronomical observations, and legal records. By integrating religious, social, and practical functions, temples reinforced the Egyptians' worldview that the divine was not distant but intertwined with daily life. They provided a tangible connection to the gods, a place where humans could honor, petition, and witness the presence of the divine, making the temple a living microcosm of the universe itself. Funerary practices and the art of mummification in ancient Egypt was not the end of existence but a transition into a carefully guided journey. Central to this journey was mummification, a process that preserved the body for the soul's continued existence in the afterlife. Egyptians believed that the physical body and spiritual essence were deeply intertwined, making preservation essential. For eternal life, embalmers, guided by Anubis, carefully removed internal organs, treated the body with resins and oils, and wrapped it meticulously in linen. Amulets, charms, and spells from the Book of the Dead were placed within the wrappings to protect the deceased from harm and ensure a safe passage through the underworld. Tombs were constructed as eternal homes, filled with offerings, furniture, and art representing daily life to sustain the soul in its new realm. The weighing of the heart ceremony epitomized the Egyptians' vision of justice and morality. Guided by Anubis and recorded by Thoth, the heart of the deceased was measured against the feather of Mat. A heart in balance signified a life lived in harmony, granting access to the field of reeds, a paradise mirroring earthly pleasures. In perfect abundance, a heart found wanting risked annihilation, emphasizing ethical living and cosmic accountability. Funerary practices extended beyond the elite. Ordinary Egyptians, though lacking grand tombs, participated in similar rituals, on a smaller scale, using miniature figures, prayers, and local cemeteries. Through these practices, life, death, and the divine were inseparable. Mummification and burial rituals illustrated the Egyptians' commitment to order, morality, and continuity, ensuring that the gods, the cosmos, and humanity remained eternally connected. Sacred animals and divine symbolism in ancient Egypt. Animals were far more than companions or sources of food. They were living symbols of the gods and embodiments of divine power. Each creature represented aspects of the cosmic order, bridging the mortal and divine worlds in ways that shaped religion, art, and daily life. Cats were closely associated with Bastet, the goddess of home, fertility, and protection. Their presence in households was believed to guard against evil spirits, reflecting the goddess's watchful nature. Harming a cat was considered a serious offense, as it disrupted both domestic and spiritual balance. Falcons symbolized Horus, representing kingship, vision, and vigilance over the sky. They reminded Egyptians that rulers were guided by divine oversight and connected to cosmic authority. Crocodiles embodied Sobek's strength and unpredictability, reflecting the Nile's dual nature as both life-giving and dangerous. Worship of Sobek ensured safety, prosperity, and military might. Ibis birds, linked to Thoth, represented wisdom, learning, and the meticulous recording of events. Even small creatures, like scarabs, symbolized rebirth and transformation, appearing on amulets, jewelry, and tomb walls to protect the living and the dead. Through these sacred animals, Egyptians experienced a world alive with divine presence. Every paw, feather, or scale was a potential messenger, guardian, or conduit for spiritual energy. Animals were not merely symbols, they were active participants in the maintenance of Mat, the cosmic balance, reinforcing the idea that divinity permeated all aspects of life and nature. Mythology in daily life for the ancient Egyptians. Mythology was not confined to temples, tombs, or scrolls. It was woven into the fabric of everyday life. Stories of gods, creation, and cosmic battles shaped how people understood the world, interacted with one another, and approached their daily tasks. Farmers looked to the Nile and the sky through the lens of myth. The flooding of the river was not just a natural phenomenon, it was Osiris's resurrection, ensuring fertile soil and abundant crops. Seasons were marked by divine rhythms, and agricultural success was inseparable from the god's favor. Artisans and craftsmen invoked Ptah or Thoth, seeking inspiration and skill, while merchants and travelers prayed to protective deities like Base to safeguard their ventures. Homes contained small shrines and amulets connecting ordinary citizens to the divine. Even simple acts, lighting incense, reciting a prayer, or wearing a protective charm were considered ways to uphold Mat and maintain harmony between mortals, nature, and the gods. Festivals and community rituals provided opportunities to relive mythic stories, blending education, entertainment, and spiritual devotion into memorable experiences. Through these daily practices, mythology became practical guidance, moral instruction, and a source of comfort. It reminded Egyptians that the world was alive with divine influence, and that human action, respect for the gods, and adherence to cosmic principles were essential for prosperity, safety, and balance. In this way, myth was not just was a blueprint for living a meaningful and harmonious life. Cosmic battles and Apophis. One of the most dramatic aspects of Egyptian mythology is the nightly battle between Ra, the sun god, and Apophis, the chaos serpent. Apophis, also called Apep, wasn't just a snake, he was the personification of chaos, darkness, and destruction. Every night, as the sun sank below the horizon, Apophis attempted to swallow Ra's solar bark, threatening to plunge the world into eternal darkness. Ra's journey through the underworld was perilous, guided by Seth, surprisingly enough, and protected by magical spells and prayers recited by priests. Ra confronted the serpent in a cosmic duel that symbolized the ongoing struggle between order and chaos. Egyptians believed that if Apophis succeeded, even once the Nile wouldn't flood, crops would fail, and disorder would reign on earth. This nightly battle wasn't just myth, it reflected the Egyptians' understanding of the fragile balance sustaining life. The fight against Apophis was more than physical, it was deeply symbolic. Each attack he launched represented threats to cosmic order, human society, and divine authority. Ra's triumph each morning was a reassurance that Mat, the principle of truth, balance, and harmony, had been maintained. It also emphasized that even gods required vigilance, strategy, and allies to preserve the universe. Priests played a critical role in this cosmic struggle. Rituals, chants, and offerings were performed daily to assist Ra in defeating Apophis. These practices demonstrated that humans were not passive observers, they were active participants in sustaining cosmic order. The story of Ra and Apophis illustrates the Egyptians' view that life, death, and the natural world were governed by ongoing dynamic forces, and that courage, intelligence, and devotion could keep chaos at bay. Mythical creatures and hybrid beings. Ancient Egyptian mythology teemed with extraordinary creatures, beings that were part animal, part human, or entirely fantastical. These hybrids were more than decorative. They embodied the powers, attributes, and domains of the gods, acting as bridges between the mortal and divine worlds. The Sphinx is perhaps the most famous, combining a lion's strength with a human's intelligence. Guardians of temples and tombs, sphinxes symbolize protection, vigilance, and a fusion of physical power with spiritual wisdom. Similarly, the griffin, with the body of a lion and the head and wings of a falcon, represented dominance over both land and sky, blending Horus' vision with the strength of Sobek or Sekhmet. Serpents held a unique place, often linked to chaos, renewal, or divine guardianship. Apophis represented malevolent chaos threatening cosmic order, while the rearing cobra on pharaohs' crowns, symbolized protective energy, divine authority, and the king's ability to strike enemies before they could cause harm. Other hybrid figures, such as the lion-headed Sekhmet, jackal-headed Anubis, and Ibis, Thoth conveyed the god's specific powers through symbolic animal traits. Each head, limb, or combination carried meaning, speed, vision, ferocity, wisdom, or protection. By embodying these traits, the Egyptians illustrated that the divine could not always be contained in human form. It required the language of symbolism, nature, and imagination. These mythical beings were not simply fantastical, they reinforced the Egyptians' worldview that every element of life and death, every threat and blessing could be understood through the interplay of form, function, and divine power. Their presence in temples, tombs, and art ensured that humans were constantly reminded of the god's reach, the forces of chaos, and the cosmic balance that governed existence. Royalty and divine kingship in ancient Egypt, the pharaoh was far more than a political leader. He was the living embodiment of the gods on earth, a divine intermediary tasked with maintaining Mat, the cosmic order. From birth, the king's identity was intertwined with the gods, particularly Horus and Ra, signaling that royal authority was both earthly and celestial. Horus, the falcon-headed god, represented kingship and protection, and every pharaoh was considered his living incarnation. By linking rulers to Horus, Egyptians reinforced the idea that political power was sacred, legitimized by divine mandate. This connection meant that the pharaoh's decisions weren't just administrative, were acts that could sustain or disrupt the cosmic balance. Ceremonies, coronations, and rituals emphasized this divine relationship, often featuring symbolic acts like the opening of the mouth to breathe life into statues, or the king himself, further bridging mortal and divine realms. Pharaohs also merged with other gods to enhance their authority. For instance, by associating with Ra, a king could claim solar power, omniscience, and supreme protection. The throne itself became a symbolic seat of the universe, and the king's duties, tax collection, law enforcement, temple construction, and military leadership were considered sacred obligations. Even death reinforced divine kingship. Tombs, pyramids, and elaborate funerary rituals transformed pharaohs into eternal beings, joining Osiris in the afterlife. By living as Horus on earth and ascending as Osiris in death, the pharaoh completed a cosmic cycle, illustrating that royalty was not merely a matter of governance. It was an essential link between gods, humans, and the order of the universe. Through this fusion of divine authority and political power, ancient Egypt maintained stability, reverence, and the unbroken thread of Mat for millennia. Temples and ritual technology. Temples in ancient Egypt were far more than places of worship. They were sophisticated centers where architecture, art, and ritual intersected to create a tangible connection to the divine. Every design choice, from towering pylons to intricate carvings, had symbolic significance, transforming the temple into a microcosm of the cosmos. Obelisks, for example, were not mere monuments. They represented the sun's rays, channeling Ra's power into the temple precinct and the surrounding land. Statues of gods and pharaohs served as focal points for worship, enabling humans to interact with the divine through visual and symbolic presence. Sacred instruments, bells, sistrums, and ritual tools activated cosmic energy during ceremonies, while incense, oils, and offerings amplified spiritual power and maintained a delicate balance between worlds. Priests acted as engineers of the sacred. Their daily rituals, chants, and precise movements ensured that the gods remained honored and that Mat was upheld. Temples also functioned as hubs of learning, medicine, and administration, storing astronomical records, legal documents, and magical texts. This integration of knowledge and worship demonstrates that temples were not only spiritual centers but also practical, cultural, and intellectual hubs. Through these structures and technologies, ancient Egyptians created immersive experiences where humans could witness, participate in, and influence the divine order. The temple was a living, breathing system that reinforced the universe's balance, symbolically and physically connecting the mortal and immortal, the earthly and the cosmic. Lesser-known gods and quirky deities beyond the major gods. Ancient Egypt's pantheon was filled with lesser-known, eccentric, and highly specialized deities. These gods often governed niche aspects of life, nature, or human behavior, reflecting the Egyptians' belief that no part of existence was too small to escape divine influence. Base, for example, was a dwarf god who protected households, women in childbirth, and children. Despite his comical appearance, he was feared by evil spirits and invoked for protection and good fortune. Tauret, a hippopotamus goddess with a pregnant belly, lion limbs, and a crocodile tail, oversaw fertility and childbirth, symbolizing both the danger and the nurturing aspects of life. Other deities embodied abstract or unusual concepts. Hapi governed the Nile's flooding, ensuring agricultural abundance. Seshat, the goddess of writing and measurement, guided scribes and architects, linking precision and knowledge with divine favor. Even minor spirits were incorporated into daily life. Amulets, charms, and household rituals invoked their aid to ward off misfortune or attract blessings. These quirky gods highlight how Egyptians perceived the divine as intimately involved in every facet of existence, from the whimsical to the terrifying. Every deity had a purpose, a personality, and a story, reminding humans that life's mysteries, challenges, and joys were overseen by divine forces. Together, they created a rich, endlessly fascinating pantheon, where humor, protection, creativity, and magic coexisted alongside the more famous gods. Symbolism in art and hieroglyphs in ancient Egypt. Art and writing were more than decorative, they were powerful tools for communication, storytelling, and religious expression. Every symbol, color, and pose carried meaning, serving as a visual language that connected humans to the divine. Hieroglyphs, often called the words of the gods, were considered sacred. They were not just a way to record information, they were a conduit for magical and spiritual power. Writing a name, a spell, or a prayer could invoke the gods, protect the dead, or maintain cosmic order. Artistic depictions followed strict conventions. Gods were often shown in hybrid forms: lion heads, falcon heads, or multiple limbs to symbolize their powers and responsibilities. Colors were symbolic. Gold represented divine, eternal life. Green symbolized rebirth and fertility, and red conveyed chaos, danger, or energy. Poses also mattered. The figure walking to the left or right, raising a hand, or holding an ankh communicated specific actions, intentions, or authority. Temple walls, tombs, and papyri were adorned with scenes of mythic events, daily life, and rituals. These images were not mere decoration, they were active participants in religious practice, designed to ensure protection, sustain mat, and guide souls through the afterlife. Even mundane objects, like amulets and jewelry, incorporated symbolic motifs to bring divine favor and safeguard the wearer. Through art and hieroglyphs, the Egyptians created a universe where every visual element had purpose and power. They encoded myth, morality, and magic into forms that were both beautiful and functional, ensuring that the spiritual and mortal worlds remained inseparably connected. These visual languages allowed humans to interact with the gods, honor the cosmos, and preserve knowledge across generations, making art itself an act of devotion and a bridge to eternity. Moral and ethical lessons from mythology. Egyptian mythology was more than captivating stories of gods and cosmic battles. It was a blueprint for living a moral and ethical life. The myths provided guidance on how humans should act, how society should function, and how to maintain harmony with the natural and divine order. Central to these lessons was the concept of Mat, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic justice. Upholding Mat meant acting with honesty, fairness, and integrity, ensuring that the fragile balance between chaos and order endured. The stories of Osiris, Set, Isis, and Horus illustrated principles of justice, loyalty, and responsibility. Osiris' fairness as ruler of the underworld showed that virtuous behavior and ethical governance were rewarded, while Set's chaos warned of the destructive consequences of envy, deceit, and ambition unchecked by morality. Horus' perseverance and strategic thinking emphasized courage, resilience, and the importance of rightful leadership. Even lesser-known deities, like Thoth and Sekchat, reinforced values of knowledge, wisdom, and meticulous care in one's work and decisions. These lessons were not abstract, they influenced daily behavior, legal systems, and social norms. Egyptians were expected to act ethically toward family, neighbors, and strangers, and ritual practices often mirrored moral principles, such as offering to the gods and honoring ancestors. The afterlife provided a powerful incentive. The weighing of the heart against the feather of Mat demonstrated that moral integrity determined eternal fate, making ethical living both a spiritual duty and a practical concern. Through mythology, Egyptians internalized these lessons, creating a society where ethics, law, and spirituality were inseparable. Stories of divine triumph, cosmic balance, and moral consequences reminded humans that every action mattered, encouraging them to live in harmony with both gods and the natural order of the universe. Mythology, in this way, was not just entertainment, it was a guide to life, a mirror of cosmic truth, and a lasting moral compass. Lesser known but fascinating god Syncretism, the ram-headed potter god, holds a unique place in Egyptian mythology. He molded humans on his cosmic potter's wheel, shaping clay into living beings and breathing life into them. His creative power extended beyond humans. He formed the Nile's riverbanks, ensuring fertile land for crops. In many ways, Syncretism was both artisan and civil engineer, blending the creative and practical aspects of divine influence. A multitasking god who governed both life and the forces of nature. Sobek, the crocodile god, embodied duality, terror, and protection intertwined. He ruled over the Nile, water, and military prowess, feared for his ferocity. Sobek was also revered for safeguarding the river and ensuring fertility. Temples along the Nile honored him, and sacred crocodiles were sometimes kept as living symbols of his presence. Sobek's example illustrates that divine power often walks hand in hand with danger, teaching respect and reverence for both nature and authority. Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of war, destruction, and healing, was a force of nature herself. She protected the pharaohs and wielded terrifying power, capable of annihilating humanity in fits of rage, only to be tempered by divine cunning. Her dual-nature destroyer and healer reminded Egyptians that power is complex. It can harm, protect, and restore, depending on how it is guided and honored. Bastet. By contrast, brought joy, playfulness, and domestic protection. The cat goddess governed home, fertility, and safeguarding families. Cats, sacred avatars of Bastet, were cherished companions, embodying her nurturing and mischievous spirit. She demonstrates that divinity is not only about might and fear but also about love, care, and the small pleasures that enrich daily life. Tefnut, the goddess of moisture and rain, played a subtle yet vital role. Her waters brought life to the Nile, sustaining crops and communities, often depicted with a lioness head. Tefnut represented the essential balance between ferocity and life-giving sustenance. Her myths intertwined with her brother Shu, god of air, illustrating the equilibrium of natural forces that maintain cosmic order. Nut, the sky goddess, and Geb, the earth god, tell a story of love, separation, and universal balance. Shu separated to them to create space for life, establishing the framework of the world. Nut's star-studded body forms the night sky, while Geb becomes the solid earth. Their children Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys carry forward the lineage of gods central to Egyptian myth, linking cosmic order with divine family dynamics. Finally, Ptah, the god of craftsmen, architects, and creation through speech, embodies intellect and vision. Unlike Atom's physical creation or Chem's clay, Ptah brings the universe into being through thought and word. He represents the creative spark, the planning and precision behind temples, statues, and civilization itself, emphasizing that creation is as much about wisdom as it is about force. Exploring these lesser-known gods, Numsobek, Sekhmet, Bastet, Tefnut, Nut, Geb, and Ptah reveals the depth and complexity of the Egyptian pantheon. Each deity possesses a distinct personality, role, and lesson, reflecting the Egyptians' nuanced understanding of life, nature, and the cosmos. From fierce warriors to playful companions, from cosmic engineers to river protectors, these gods enrich the mythology, making it vivid, relatable, and endlessly fascinating. Next, the stage is set for epic myths and legendary stories, the battles, betrayals, magic, and cosmic events that bring the gods' powers and personalities to life. The underworld and afterlife introduction. The underworld, or Duat, was more than a place. It was a complex realm where life, death, and the divine intertwined. Egyptians believed that death was not the end, but a passage into a new existence, where the soul would face challenges, judgment, and transformation. Every tomb, ritual, and spell was designed to prepare the deceased for this journey, ensuring they could navigate the Duat safely and achieve eternal life. At the heart of the underworld were gods and spirits, who oversaw every stage of the soul's passage. Osiris, the ruler of the dead, ensured fairness and balance, while Anubis guided souls and oversaw embalming. Thoth recorded outcomes and maintained cosmic order, and Mat represented truth and justice, essential for passing judgment. The journey was perilous, filled with obstacles, guardians, and tests, but also illuminated by divine wisdom and protection. From mummification to tomb inscriptions, the Egyptians created a detailed roadmap for the afterlife. Each ritual, amulet, and offering served a purpose, from safeguarding the body to empowering the soul for its trials. The underworld was a reflection of the world above, a place where order, morality, and divine law were upheld, ensuring that the cycles of life, death, and rebirth continued unbroken. Understanding that Duat reveals how deeply the Egyptians integrated their mythology into daily life. Their gods were not distant figures but active participants in the destiny of every soul. Life on earth and the afterlife were inseparably linked, making devotion, ethical conduct, and ritual practice essential for both mortal and divine harmony. This is where the myths take on tangible significance, shaping how Egyptians lived, governed, and hoped for eternity. Mummification, preserving the body for eternity. Central to the Egyptian afterlife was the practice of mummification, a meticulous process designed to preserve the body for the soul's journey through the Duat. Egyptians believed that the physical body was the vessel for the way, the life force, and the the personality or soul. Without a properly preserved body, the soul could not survive or return, jeopardizing eternal life. The process was intricate and sacred. Organs were carefully removed, treated, and stored in canopic jars, each guarded by a specific deity. The body was cleansed, dried with natron salts, and wrapped in layers of linen, often accompanied by amulets to provide protection and guidance. Priests performed spells and rituals throughout, ensuring that the deceased was prepared for every challenge that lay ahead. Mummification was not just a physical act, it was a spiritual contract. By preserving the body and following the proper rites, the deceased maintained favor with the gods, particularly Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of embalming and the afterlife. The process exemplified the Egyptian belief that life and death were continuous, a carefully maintained cycle where divine law, human effort, and cosmic order intersected. In essence, mummification reflected the Egyptians' obsession with order, control, and preparation. Death was not chaotic or final. It was another stage in the divine plan. Through careful preservation and ritual, the Egyptians ensured that the soul could navigate the underworld, face judgment, and ultimately reunite with the eternal cosmic order that governed the universe. The journey through the Duat trials and guardians. Once a soul left the mortal world, it entered the Duat, a vast and mysterious realm filled with dangers, divine beings, and transformative challenges. The Egyptians imagined the underworld as a layered landscape, dark waters, hidden pathways, gates guarded by supernatural entities, and regions illuminated by the presence of gods who tested and guided the deceased. Souls encountered guardians, monsters, and obstacles meant to challenge their worthiness. These weren't arbitrary trials. They reflected moral and cosmic laws. Each challenge tested the individual's adherence to Mat, the principles of truth, balance, and justice. Successfully navigating these trials required knowledge, courage, and divine assistance. That's why tombs contained spells, maps, and protective charms. The Book of the Dead, for example. It was essentially a survival guide for the soul's perilous journey. Anubis played a critical role, guiding souls safely through the underworld's twists and turns, while Thoth recorded deeds and ensured that the scales of judgment were fair. The journey was symbolic as well as literal, a spiritual odyssey, representing the soul's purification and readiness to join the eternal order. The Duat emphasized that the afterlife was not passive. Success required both preparation in life and adherence to the divine laws of the cosmos. The trials of the underworld reinforced the Egyptians' worldview. Life was a test of morality, devotion, and respect for cosmic order, and the rewards of eternity were reserved for those who honored the gods and upheld Mat. The weighing of the heart, judgment, and cosmic justice. At the heart of the Duat lay the most critical moment for any soul. The weighing of the heart here, the deceased's heart, the seat of emotion, morality, and consciousness, was placed on a scale against the feather of Mat, the goddess of truth and cosmic balance. This ritual determined whether the soul was pure and worthy of eternal life. Anubis presided over the ceremony, carefully guiding the process and ensuring the scales were balanced. Thoth recorded the outcome with meticulous precision, while Ammit, the fearsome devourer, part lion, part crocodile, part hippopotamus, waited to consume the hearts of those deemed unworthy. Failure meant annihilation, a complete erasure from the cosmic order, emphasizing the grave consequences of immoral living. The weighing of the heart wasn't just a terrifying judgment, it was a profound moral lesson. It reinforced the importance of living in harmony with Mat, acting justly, speaking truthfully, and maintaining balance in every aspect of life. Ancient Egyptians understood that their actions, thoughts, and intentions had consequences not only in this life but in the eternal journey that followed. Through this ritual, the afterlife was framed as a continuation of moral accountability. It demonstrated that the cosmos demanded fairness, and that divine order depended on human integrity. By preparing for this judgment through rituals, offerings, and ethical living, the Egyptians ensured that their souls could pass through the Duat successfully, joining the eternal cycle of life, death, and divine harmony. The murder of Osiris and the rise of Isis, epic battles, and cosmic struggles. The heart of Egyptian mythology begins with Osiris, the wise and just king of gods and humans alike. Beloved by all, he ruled with fairness, ensuring crops flourished and people thrived. Yet, his brother Set, god of chaos, burned with jealousy, craving power and recognition. Set devised a cunning plot. He tricked Osiris into lying in an exquisitely decorated coffin, sealed it shut, and cast it into the Nile. Osiris drowned, and the world plunged into mourning, shrouded in despair and uncertainty. Isis, his devoted wife, refused to let death triumph. Embarking on a daring quest, she crossed deserts, navigated treacherous waters, and outwitted Set's minions. With her mastery of magic, she reassembled Osiris's body and restored him to life long enough to conceive their son, Horus. Osiris then assumed his rightful role as ruler of the underworld, guiding souls and upholding cosmic balance. This story of death, resurrection, and clever magic is central to Egyptian myth, demonstrating that life, death, and family loyalty are inextricably linked, and even gods must contend with chaos. The saga continues with Horus, Osiris' son, destined to reclaim his father's throne. From an early age, Horus trained, strategized, and prepared for the inevitable confrontation with Set. Their battles spanned land, river, and sky, fought with spears, magic, and cunning, sometimes in human form, sometimes as animals. Set represented raw chaos and ambition, while Horus embodied order, justice, and rightful kingship. One of the most iconic moments is the Battle of the Eyes, where Set gouges out Horus' eye. Yet, through Thoth's wisdom, the eye is restored, transforming into the Eye of Horus, a powerful symbol of healing, protection, and triumph over adversity. Eventually, Horus defeats Set, claims the throne, and restores order to the world, emphasizing justice, balance, and the importance of rightful leadership, a lesson Egyptians carried into daily life and governance. Meanwhile, another cosmic struggle unfolds each night as Ra journeys through the underworld, facing Apophis, the serpent of chaos who seeks to devour the sun and plunge the world into darkness. Assisted often by Set, Ra combats Apophis across the horizon, the underworld waters, and the secret pathways of the Duat. Each morning Ra's victory ensures sunrise, life, and stability. Humans too were believed to influence this eternal struggle. Prayers, offerings, and rituals could help Ra triumph, making mortals active participants in the cosmic order. These epic narratives, Osiris' resurrection, Horus battles, and Ra's nightly journey, serve as allegories for life, death, and struggle. They reveal that even divine beings face chaos, conflict, and cosmic challenges, highlighting themes of loyalty, justice, and perseverance. These stories intertwined human experience with divine action, teaching that balance and order require effort, wisdom, and courage from gods and mortals alike. In this segment, we witness murder, magic, epic battles, and cosmic struggles. Osiris' death and resurrection showcased loyalty and mystical power. Horus' confrontation with Set demonstrates the triumph of justice and rightful order. Ra's nightly battle against Apophis reminds us that the cosmos itself is an ongoing drama, with gods and humans working together to maintain balance. Next, the journey continues into the underworld, exploring the Duat mummification, the weighing of the heart, and the trials every soul faced after death, where myths touch the fate of all mortals. The role of amulets and spells, protection. In the afterlife, the Egyptians didn't leave the soul to face the Duat unprepared. Amulets, charms, and spells were essential tools designed to protect, guide, and empower the deceased. Each object and inscription had a specific purpose, from warding off dangerous creatures to granting strength, wisdom, or favor from the gods. Scarabs, for example, symbolized rebirth and transformation, while the Eye of Horus offered protection, health, and restoration. These items were carefully placed within tomb wrappings or burial chambers, ensuring that the soul had spiritual armor for every trial in the underworld. Spells from the Book of the Dead were recited to help navigate obstacles, unlock gates, and appease divine guardians. The use of amulets and spells underscores a key Egyptian belief. The afterlife was an active journey requiring preparation, knowledge, and divine assistance. Life and death were interconnected. Just as rituals and ethics shaped life on earth, so too did magical practices shape the soul's success in the Duat. In essence, these protective measures transformed death into a passage rather than a chaotic ordeal. They reflect the Egyptians' meticulous attention to cosmic order, their deep understanding of symbolic power, and their unwavering commitment to ensuring that every soul had the tools needed to survive, thrive, and ultimately join the eternal harmony of the universe. The battle for the throne. Horus versus Seth. A struggle for power between Horus and Set is one of the most dramatic and enduring stories in Egyptian mythology. After Osiris' death and resurrection, the throne of Egypt became the ultimate prize, and Horus, the rightful heir, faced the formidable challenge of defeating his uncle Set, the god of chaos, storms, and ambition. From his earliest days, Horus trained relentlessly, mastering strategy, combat, and magical arts. Set, cunning and ruthless, employed trickery, deception, and raw force to maintain control. Their battles were epic, spanning rivers, deserts, and the skies, often taking the form of both human and animal shapes. The myths describe intense confrontations, cosmic duels, and intricate plots, each reflecting the larger themes of order versus chaos, justice versus ambition. One of the most famous moments is the conflict known as the Battle of the Eyes. During this struggle, Set gouged out one of Horus's eyes, symbolizing the threat of disorder and the high stakes of their cosmic feud. But with the wisdom of Thoth, the eye was restored, becoming the iconic Eye of Horus, a symbol of healing, protection, and divine justice. Ultimately, Horus triumphed, reclaiming his father's throne and restoring the principle of balance and truth, to the cosmos. This victory wasn't just a political claim. It was a cosmic event, reinforcing the idea that rightful leadership, moral integrity, and adherence to divine law are essential for maintaining harmony in both the mortal world and the divine realm. The saga of Horus and Set teaches that struggle, perseverance, and justice are central to life and governance. It also illustrates that chaos, while dangerous, has a role in the universe, challenging order and ensuring that balance must be consciously maintained by both gods and humans alike. Other cosmic battles are Apophis and the eternal struggle beyond, the familial and political conflicts among gods. Egyptian mythology is filled with epic cosmic battles that symbolize the ongoing struggle between order and chaos. Chief among these is Ra's nightly journey through the underworld, where he faces Apophis, the immense serpent of chaos. Each night, Apophis attempts to devour the sun, threatening to plunge the world into eternal darkness. Ra does not face this challenge alone. Set, despite his previous conflicts with his family, often assists the sun god in these battles, demonstrating that even chaos has a role in maintaining cosmic balance. Together, with magical spells, divine weapons, and strategic maneuvers, they fend off Apophis attacks, ensuring that the sun rises each morning, These nightly battles are more than stories. They embody the Egyptians' understanding of life as a constant struggle where order must be actively defended. Other minor gods and spirits also play roles in these cosmic conflicts, protecting sacred waterways, guarding gates, and ensuring that the cycles of nature continue uninterrupted. Each battle reinforces the themes of vigilance, courage, and the necessity of cooperation between deities, even those with conflicting natures. These myths remind Egyptians that the cosmos is not static. Life, death, and existence itself are maintained through effort, ritual, and divine intervention. By witnessing these battles, mortals could understand that challenges, whether in life, governance, or nature, are an essential part of sustaining harmony, and that perseverance and moral action have cosmic significance. Thousands of years have passed, yet the gods of ancient Egypt aren't just relics of history, they're still alive in our world today. Their stories, symbols, and myths quietly shape the art we admire, the movies we watch, and even the way we think about life, death, and morality. Imagine walking through a city and spotting a golden sun, a mysterious eye, or a graceful catwalk, if those weren't just decorations, but echoes of gods who once ruled the Nile. Today, we're uncovering the hidden ways these divine figures continue to influence us, from colossal monuments to the tiniest details in modern culture, and what you're about to discover might completely change the way you see the world around you. The pyramids, temples, and tombs of ancient Egypt weren't just impressive feats of engineering, they were messages to the divine. Every column, carving, and hieroglyph had a purpose: to honor the gods, guide souls through the afterlife, and maintain the balance of the universe. These weren't random decorations, they were carefully planned symbols of power, devotion, and cosmic order. Even today, architects and designers study these structures for inspiration, trying to capture the same sense of awe and precision. The massive stones, the alignment with the stars, the intricate reliefs, each element tells a story that stood the test of millennia. And while the pyramids may seem frozen in time, their influence continues to ripple through modern design, hinting that the god's presence is far from gone. The influence of Egyptian gods didn't stop at stone and architecture, it bled into art and symbolism in ways that are still recognizable today. The Eye of Horus, for instance, isn't just a striking image, it's a symbol of protection and well-being that resonates across cultures. Cats, revered for their grace, remind us of Bastet, while lions carry the raw power of Sekhmet, and the sun, ever present in Egyptian iconography, echoes the majesty of Ra, the sun god. These images created a visual language so strong that it shaped Greek and Roman art, and centuries later European aesthetics. Even now, artists and designers unconsciously draw from this rich tapestry of symbols, proving that the gods' influence was never just ceremonial, it was cultural, aesthetic, and enduring. And while art preserves their image, storytelling ensures their myths live on, ready to leap from canvas to page to screen. Egyptian myths didn't just stay on temple walls, they leapt into stories, movies, and even video games, keeping the gods alive in ways anyone can experience. Writers borrow epic battles, family drama, curses, and resurrection stories straight from the tales of Osiris, Isis, Horus, Set, and Ra. Movies like Gods of Egypt dramatize these timeless conflicts, while fantasy novels twist them into magical adventures full of intrigue and danger. Video games take it further, immersing players in pyramid explorations, underworld quests, and battles against divine forces, letting them interact with mythology firsthand. What's fascinating is how these ancient stories still feel fresh, thrilling, and mysterious 7,000 years later. And as they move from page to screen, they carry more than entertainment, they transmit the values, fears, and imagination of an entire civilization. But the gods' reach doesn't end with entertainment. Their beliefs shaped how humans think about life, death, and morality. The beliefs of ancient Egypt weren't just about rituals, they were a framework for understanding life, death, and the universe. Concepts like the afterlife, moral judgment, and the eternal struggle between order and chaos were central to their worldview. The weighing of the heart, for example, wasn't just a story, it was a reflection of how Egyptians measured virtue and truth, guided by the principles of mat, balance, justice, and harmony. Following these ideals was a way to earn favor from the gods and secure peace in the next world. Even today, echoes of these ideas appear in philosophy, ethics, and spiritual practices around the globe. Humanity's search for meaning, justice, and moral balance owes a surprising debt to these ancient teachings. And while these philosophies shaped thought, they also fueled a fascination that continues to permeate popular culture, from mysterious tombs to tales of curses that capture our imagination. The fascination with ancient Egypt goes far beyond history books. It pulses through movies, TV shows, books, and even fashion. Mummies, hidden tombs, and mysterious curses aren't just Hollywood exaggerations. They're echoes of centuries-old myths that captured the imagination of explorers, writers, and everyday people alike. The allure lies in the mystery of the unknown, dangers, the secret knowledge, and the power of gods who once ruled the Nile. Every new discovery, from a hidden chamber to a forgotten relic, reignites that excitement and reminds us why Egypt's legends endure. Fans of adventure, magic, and suspense continue to be drawn to these stories, proving that the mystique of the Egyptian gods is timeless. And just when you think you've seen it all, another story emerges, one that pulls you deeper into a world of divine drama and cosmic intrigue. Even today, the gods of Egypt continue to inspire awe, creativity, and reflection. Ra's blazing sun reminds us of life's energy and power. Osiris' story of resurrection speaks to hope and renewal. Isis' devotion teaches loyalty and love, and Anubis' guidance evokes the mysteries of life and death. These aren't just ancient tales, they're symbols woven into the fabric of modern culture. From art and architecture to literature, films, and even everyday objects. Traces of Egyptian mythology are everywhere, often unnoticed yet always present. Look closely, and you'll see their fingerprints on symbols, stories, and ideas that shape how we understand the world. The gods of the Nile weren't just worshipped, they were a blueprint for human imagination, ethics, and creativity, leaving a legacy that refuses to fade. And as culture evolves, their influence keeps finding new ways to surprise and captivate us. The gods of ancient Egypt may belong to a distant past, but their influence is anything but gone. Every sun, cat, feather, or mysterious ice symbol is more than decoration, it's a whisper from a civilization that shaped human history, culture, and imagination. From epic battles to divine drama, from cosmic adventures to lessons in morality, these myths continue to inspire awe and curiosity. They remind us that mythology isn't just about the past, it's a living, breathing force that shapes how we tell stories, create art, and understand the world around us. So next time you encounter a symbol that seems familiar yet mysterious, remember, the gods of the Nile are still speaking, still guiding, and still sparking wonder. And perhaps, in their stories, we find a little bit of our own search for meaning, connection, and the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. When the sun dipped below the horizon, the Egyptians believed life didn't end, it merely transitioned into the mysterious realm of the Duat, the underworld. Far from a dark or empty void, the Duat was a complex, layered world filled with winding rivers, lakes of fire, serpents, divine guardians, and gates that every soul had to navigate with care. It was a cosmic labyrinth where gods actively worked, and where the forces of order and chaos clashed nightly. Humans' deeds on earth could influence their path, making morality, courage, and wisdom essential for survival in this realm. Death was never taken lightly in ancient Egypt. The body had to be carefully preserved because the soul, or ka, needed a vessel to survive in the afterlife. Mummification was a meticulous process involving purification, drying, and wrapping the body in linen, often accompanied by spells, charms, and offerings. Every detail mattered. Amulets protected the heart, eyes were painted to guide the soul, and the mouth was symbolically opened so the deceased could eat, drink, and speak in the afterlife. This elaborate ritual wasn't just about preservation. It was a magical guarantee that the soul could continue its journey safely through the Duat. One of the most dramatic and well-known moments in the Egyptian afterlife was the weighing of the heart in this trial. The deceased's heart, the seat of conscience and moral character, was weighed against the feather of Mat, goddess of truth, balance, and justice. If the heart was light and free of wrongdoing, the soul could pass into eternal life, joining Osiris in paradise. But if it was heavy with sin or deceit, it faced Emmet, the terrifying crocodile-lion-hippopotamus hybrid, who devoured the unworthy heart, erasing the soul forever. This wasn't just a myth, it was a cosmic moral audit, reinforcing the importance of living in accordance with Mat throughout one's life. To navigate the perils of the Duat, the deceased often relied on the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells, prayers, and instructions designed to guide the soul safely through the underworld. Think of it as a magical survival guide. It provided incantations to ward off dangers, appease the gods, and unlock the many gates and barriers of the afterlife. Amulets, protective symbols, and recited spells worked in tandem with these texts, ensuring that even those who faced unexpected challenges could reach their eternal reward. Without this guidance, even a life well lived on earth could encounter peril in the afterlife, emphasizing the meticulous care Egyptians took in preparing for death. Imagine stepping into a temple in ancient Egypt, not just a building, not just a place of prayer, but the very home of a god. Each temple had a cult statue, and to the Egyptians, this wasn't decoration, it was a living, breathing presence. Priests didn't just tend to it casually. They fed it, bathed it, dressed it, and offered incense, keeping the god comfortable and content. After all, a happy deity meant a well-ordered world. A grumpy one, well, floods might fail, chaos might rise, and nobody wants that. The architecture of these temples was a story in stone. Pylons weren't just walls, they symbolized mountains, standing guard against chaos. Hypostyle halls with columns reaching skyward recreated the primeval papyrus marshes, the mythic birthplace of creation. Sanctuaries were tiny universes, microcosms, where heaven met earth, where humans could walk into divine space. It was like stepping into the cosmos itself. Worship didn't stop at grand temples. Many homes had little shrines, tiny statues of Bastet Hathor or Thoth. People would leave food, perfume, water, even whispered prayers, believing that these small gestures could earn favor from the divine. Priests, meanwhile, were like cosmic caretakers performing rituals daily, maintaining the delicate balance of order that kept the Nile flowing, crops growing, and chaos at bay. And then there were the festivals. Egyptians didn't just honor the gods quietly, they celebrated them like the ultimate block party. Music, dance, processions, elaborate ceremonies. It was a full and divine spectacle. Some festivals reenacted myths like Osiris' journey, carrying statues through streets and rivers. The Opid festival in Thebes celebrated the fertility of the pharaoh and his link to a Everyone sang, danced, and feasted, participating directly in maintaining cosmic order. Animals and symbols were everywhere too. Cats weren't just pets, they were living embodiments of Bastet. Bulls, crocodiles, and ibises carried divine power, sometimes mummified or adorned with jewelry. Eyes, ankhs, lotus flowers, they weren't just art, they were reminders that the divine existed in every corner of life. In ancient Egypt, the gods weren't distant, they were present, tangible, and constantly interacting with humans, shaping reality itself.